Greetings, everyone. This is Mar, and once again, this is my opinion. I'm coming at you with another DVD video review. And today is one of my favorite films of all time. It's been a favorite of mine since I was a kid, even though some people are going to go, an R-rated movie and you watched it as a kid? Yes, and I turned out relatively normal, thank you. It, of course, is the highly violent, satirical film from 1987, directed by Paul Verhoeven, Robocop. Come quietly or there will be trouble. This is the 20th anniversary DVD release. I got mine a couple years later, a little bit cheaper. But it's a pretty good special edition. It's 2 discs. Has 2 versions of the film. Has the original 87 theatrical cut along with the extended director's cut. Now the reason it is an extended director's cut is that a couple scenes that the MPAA trimmed because they were a little bit too bloody for their standards are reinserted in their original forms, and a couple other parts are adjusted slightly, like different angles. And the 2 scenes in question are, of course, the Ed 209 scene where we get to see Ken get blasted to smithereens in an even more violent thing, which of course makes Bob Morton's paramedic line make a lot more sense, and it is a lot funnier. And Murphy's death is a lot more gory, which it is a little weird, but it goes with Verhoeven's thing on the film, and that is you don't get to see the resurrection until you see the crucifixion. And plus we get to see one of Rob Bottin's dummy effects a lot better. In the theatrical cut it's just a quick back shot, whereas in the extended cut it's a turning shot where you actually see Murphy writhing in pain, like before bing. If there's any weird thing about this release, it's that Fox helped MGM release it, which I'm scratching my head at that, like, why? Did MGM just need the help releasing the set? I mean, they didn't do special editions for 2 and 3 until Shout Factory came along. Was it them not wanting to spend the money to do it, and Fox like, we'll help? If so, they're cheap bastards. As I said earlier, this is a 2-disc set. Disc 1, in addition to the theatrical cut, has the following things. It has a commentary with Paul Verhoeven, one of the writers, Ed Neumeier, and the executive producer, John Davison. I had never listened to this commentary in its entirety, but it was a very interesting commentary. If you know anything about the production history of the film, there is a lot of general knowledge stuff that they go into, but it's just nice to hear them talk about it in a group discussion. And there's other little tidbits about the filming process, like some grief they got over the gas station scene because of that explosion. How they managed to get more money to film Murphy's death, that the outside of the steel mill was filmed in Pittsburgh. I did not know that, so that was a little bit interesting, and just a lot of interesting little tidbits. Some of which are gone over again in the special features, but that's bound to happen. I don't know if this commentary is a carryover from an early and Criterion Collection set, or one that they did just for here, but it'd be one thing to find out later on. We got the making of feature called Flesh and Steel. It's the general making of documentary where they touch on the whole production history. This is where you mostly see some of the same information repeated in a different sense that we heard in the commentary, more of an interview sense more than a general chat among peers. They go over the whole history of the film, the writing process, the directing process, how Verhoeven and Neumeier and Miner actually changed some stuff as they were filming, how they got the actors involved, and just a lot of the general stuff. It's a very interesting documentary. It's a perfect example of how to make a making-of documentary for a film. And all the big cast members are in there, which some of them are in more specific ones later on, so just, a lot of the big people are mentioned. Even Peter Weller is in one of the documentaries, which those of you who have watched my review of the Shout Factory Robocop 2 set know that the present reviews with him not being there is one of my only major complaints with it. There are 2 features from back in the day, which are a nice little bonus. It's always nice to see back in the day features put on a set. Sometimes they don't do it for some weird reason, but here in Robocop 2 it was nice to see those features put in because you get a more modern perspective from the people than you got their at the time perspective, so you can compare and contrast. Then there is a nice little feature with Phil Tippett involving the debut of Ed 209 scene in the boardroom, where it goes in slow motion, compares frame by frame the stop motion work with how they storyboarded it, which that was a nice little interesting tidbit. that Verhoeven actually had them storyboard the choreography before they did the stop motion, which made it a little bit more fluid and made it easier to plan out exactly how they were going to do all the angles. Which this is why storyboarding is a must when you're filming something. I mean, sometimes you can come up with something on the fly. Like, I don't know if Verhoeven storyboarded the infamous crotch shot scene, or if he just thought it in his head. I know he came up with it on the fly on the set, but I don't believe they touched on whether they storyboarded it quickly beforehand. But if it's not, then that's a good example of ad-libbing. Then there's a handful of deleted scenes. These are deleted scenes that were not put back in the film, and you watch them and you're like, yeah, I could see why. The only one that would have been worth putting back in is the scene where Lewis is in the hospital, and even then that'd probably be like an end-credit sequence, mainly because the ending part of it feels like it'd be an end-credit sequence. And if it was in the movie proper, it would really destroy the flow of the ending with Murphy saying his name to the old man. Then there's one called Topless Pizza, which it just continues the I buy that for $1 joke. And the rest of them, they're interesting to watch, but they're deleted scenes that you look at and go, no muss, no foul. Unlike the sequel, where a couple of scenes should have been put back in the movie, more specifically the shower scene, but I've already ranted on that enough. Then, of course, we got the original theatrical trailer with the Terminator score and the TV spot. The only trailer that's missing from the set that I know of is the one where it has that quick flash of Murphy with the deceased thing with the weird voiceover going, "The body is on the way," which I really wish that had been on here. I don't know if that was a teaser or if that was a later trailer. I gotta look into that a little bit more, but I know it's on YouTube. So then on disc 2, in addition to the unrated director's cut, we have a featurette about the villains called Villains of Old Detroit, where we get all the actors who played the bad guys talking about it, or at least a couple of them, and they really did love making this film. This is where we get the whole story about Paul Verhoeven not knowing that the word bitch was a bad word to use on females here in America, so them talking about that, and that's our rap on the bitches. That story is just funny to see them all talking about it. I just wonder if anyone ever smartened him up and afterwards like, "Oh no, I offended the bitches." That's probably what he would have said, or thought at least. I can imagine Paul doing that. And then there is a featurette on the special effects of the film, which in addition to the stop motion, this is about the puppet work, making the suit, and a bunch of other aspects of the special effects work. And it's excellent to see, especially if you are a fan of stop motion effects and other practical effects, such as me. And it's definitely worth a watch, and shows that even with CGI, you still could do a lot of this stuff and actually make it look a little bit better with the added technology instead of going, "Oh, we got to do it all in the computer," which I hate that mindset. But another day, another video. And then there is the Robocop Creating a Legend featurette, which is about Peter Weller, the suit, and it's where we see a lot of Peter Weller being interviewed, giving his thoughts on the film and on creating the character. It is another interesting documentary. All the documentaries on this set are interesting in their own right, just different aspects. Definitely a much watch. The only question I wonder is why they split some of these featurettes up on the discs they did. Did they want to put the big general making of and some other stuff on the first one, and then put the villains and the Robocop and special effects one on the second one? It's one of those things that I wonder what the creative process in the studio was when they were putting this set together, but that's one thing probably to ask Davison or some of the others involved with the making of the special edition. Which I have to say, if you look at that cover, this is one of the few instances where they do a special edition cover that's weird, but I actually like it. I mean, it's not as iconic or classic as the normal Robocop poster, which, no, dang it, I don't have it briefly shown on the wall or else I could point it to. You know, the one where he's stepping out of the car, or some of the other ones, but it's still good in its own right. The second disc is inside the PlayStation, but that's what this one looks like. And disc 2, it's a close-up on Murphy without the mask. And, of course, it has one of those little booklets that has a little brief description of all the special features and then the chapter titles. And then there's this. It came with a nice little photo, which I don't think that angle or shot is in the final film, but it's from the making of it. And they do have at least part of that scene as a still image in a couple of the featurettes. So it's nice that they included that. One of the goals I have is to get that and possibly the poster signed eventually by Peter Weller. And if I ever do, on my social media accounts, you'll see me flaunting it like, "I got him!" I'd like to also get a picture of Peter Weller. In conclusion, this is a very good, well put together special edition 20th anniversary collection. I believe it's also available on Blu-ray. Not one of the more recent releases, but I believe they did import it to Blu-ray. I don't know if I'll get the Blu-ray version or if I'll get a different one just for the greater picture quality one day down the road. But if you want a version of Robocop and you're just buying it for the first time, try to track down this DVD release or the later Blu-ray version of it, because I do not know if the later Blu-ray releases have all these features, because it is worth the investment just for the features alone. Of course, for the film itself, the film is an excellent classic film. It's definitely one of my favorite films. Easily, if I were to do a top 10 films list, this would be in it. Not only just because of the action and the character development of Robocop, but just that deep story of a man trying to regain his humanity. It's also why it's one of the better films of the 80s and one of the best action films of all time. That and Paul Verhoeven also films his scenes pretty competently. The only complaint, of course, is that the score in the one scene, you could barely hear it because of the action, which they do talk about. I'd rather you guys listen to the commentary to hear their reasoning for it themselves, but it is interesting even if I don't 100% agree with it.